Hi everyone, today I'm going to be filming a bit of a tutorial for you. This is something that anyone can follow along with, so it doesn't matter whether you're a complete beginner in watercolour, you will be able to do this exercise. It's also a great exercise if, for example, you have artist block or creative block, you're a bit stuck, you don't really know what to paint, but you know you want to paint something. This is great for that. It's also good for just generally warming up if you want to start a painting session, but you don't want to go straight into something really complex or really complicated. You can just do this to warm up. It's really fun. It's actually based on my pebble swatches. So those of you who watch my channel regularly will know that I've started swatching not in the normal rectangular way, but in the shape of pebbles. I feel it shows the watercolours off beautifully and it's fun to do, and you end up with a beautiful swatch sheet at the end of it. But what we're going to do today is we're going to choose a limited palette of colours. So first of all, I want you to choose 5 colours, and they can be any colours you like. I mean, they can be more earthy, natural colours, more muted colours, and that's what I've chosen here today. Or it could be really bright colours. It doesn't matter because it's your piece of artwork and it's going to reflect you and your personality. So if you want to go really bright and do the pebbles in like really bright colours, you can. I'm going to tell you which colours I have decided to go with. So I've got the new SUGARHOUSE Random Grey 2022. This is a special edition paint. It's a really interesting and beautiful granulating grey. And what they do is they take all of the pigments at the end of the year that are left over, apparently, and they make them into this limited edition grey. So I bought this and it was a complete surprise as to how it was going to look. Obviously, I could see a little swatch online. I could kind of see what it looked like, but I didn't know just how beautiful it was until I actually swatched it out myself. So I got this from Jackson's the other week, and I did actually swatch it out for my patrons on Patreon. So we've kind of looked at this already, but I'm going to show you today. It's just beautiful. So I decided to choose that because I kind of feel like granulating colours are really beautiful as pebbles. The other colours I have here, in fact, they're all SUGARHOUSE colours. I didn't do that deliberately, it just turned out that way. I did actually look through my paints and I just thought these ones went together really well. So this one is the Shire Grey, and I also have Haze Pink. So these are really granulating colours. The Haze Indigo, also another super granulating colour. And then I decided to add the Payne's Grey Bluish, just because I love that colour. And I think it goes really nicely with the others. So hopefully that's a nice little palette of 5 colours that are going to look good on the page. I haven't swatched them out together previously, so I don't know, but I think it's going to work. I have my palette here. This is from SUGARHOUSE Ceramic Company. They very kindly sent me a few of their palettes the other week, and I am loving using them. So that's what that is, if anyone is interested. I always get asked about my palettes, my brushes, and my paper as well. I talk about the paints a lot, but I'm going to try and mention everything I'm using here. I have a little bit of kitchen paper just to wipe my brush on. I have a jar of water. The paintbrush I'm using is one of the Betty HAYWAYS watercolour brushes. If you can hear something, that's a helicopter. I have the window open because it's a sunny June afternoon and it's quite warm in here, so I've got the window open. So you'll probably hear all sorts of ambient noise. So this is the number 7 Betty HAYWAYS watercolour brush. I love these brushes. I've been using them for probably about a year or so now, and they hold a lot of paint, they hold a lot of water, and yet they have a really fine point as well. Great brushes. I got mine from the Chelsea Paper Company, I think they're called. I don't know whether you can get them anywhere else, but that's where I got mine. And the paper we're using today, it's called the AQUARELLA watercolour paper from Choosing Keeping in London. I love this. It's quite thick. It's just very lightly textured. I would say it's somewhere between a smooth paper and a cold pressed paper. It's not as textured as the usual cold pressed paper I would use. You could use something like the Bockingford cold pressed paper. I really like that one. It's the £200 paper. I don't know what that is in GSM, but that's a really nice heavyweight paper. It's not too expensive, but you can use any watercolor paper you have. The more textured the paper, the more the paints will granulate and the more texture you'll get in your pebbles. Okay, so I think the colour I'm going to start with will be the Haze Pink. So let's just squeeze some of that out onto the palette. This is a really beautiful colour. It's actually one of my favourite colours. It featured in my favourite watercolour videos. I did a couple of those. Looks quite purple actually when you first squeeze it out of the tube, but you have to wait for it to work its magic on the paper. So I don't tend to plan these out because this is just a completely relaxing, go with the flow kind of exercise. So what we're going to do is we're just going to decide where to place the first pebble. Now I want variety in the shapes of my pebbles as well, but I think what I'm going to start with, let's just start with one that's kind of maybe slightly an egg shape. So just loosely mark out and then get lots of water on your brush and just move the paint around, blending the edges. You go over the edge like I did there. Don't worry, you can just make your pebble a bit bigger. This is what I love about this. It's just quite a mindful way of painting. And if you're a beginner, by the way, don't be frightened to turn the page around. I know a lot of people like to paint just with the page in one position. Turn it around, it makes it a lot easier to get a really nice line. What was I saying? This is a really mindful exercise. It's just a lot of fun. By the way, when the pebbles are dry, we're going to, well, you could do this or not. You could choose to leave them as they are, or you can decorate them with lines and patterns. I'm going to show you how I decorate mine. So you can choose to do that or not, but look at those gorgeous colours coming through. What I like to do as well is just sort of lift off a little bit of the paint. Just clean your brush and then wipe it on your paper towel or on your piece of rag or whatever you have, and then just lift off some of the paint. I'm just going to kind of blend that in a little bit. And that gives us the nice, more 3D effect of the pebble. Okay, so the next one, what colour shall I use? I'm kind of tempted to use the random grey actually. Let's use that. I love how this comes in a really cute little box. Okay, I'm going to squeeze that one out here. And I think I'd like a larger pebble so we can really let this pigment move around and you'll see what it can do. So I wonder whether we start there. I mean, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. This is why it's so fun. Just follow your instincts, and in fact I might make that even bigger. Follow your instincts and just place the pebbles wherever you think they should go. Because this is just about enjoying paint and enjoying painting, watching the paint move on the paper. just creating something beautiful, because it will be beautiful, especially if you're using colours that you love and enjoy using. And it's kind of a good exercise in putting together colour palettes as well, seeing which colours go together. I mean, you could choose to, I don't know, perhaps you could choose to use 3 colours or 7 colours. You don't have to use 5. I just kind of feel like 5 is a nice number. It gives you a bit of variety, and if you're going to do quite a few pebbles, it's quite nice to have a few different colours. You can see, look at the blue pigment coming through on that now. So I'm going to just do the same thing as I did with the other pebble and just lift off some of that colour. Do I want to fill in that little bit in the middle there? Yeah, maybe I will on this one actually. I'm going to do a pebble with a hole in the centre. Are they called hagstones? I was told that they were called hagstones, I think. I think they're meant to be lucky, aren't they? If they have a hole in the centre. Do you see how these colours are separating? And if I hold that up, how beautiful that's looking. And as they dry, they'll change as they're drying. So you're never quite sure how they're going to look, which I really like. Okay, I think next I'm going to use the Shire Grey, and I'm just going to keep going with these pebbles until I feel like I have a really pleasing composition. So a lot of this is done on instinct. There's not really an element other than choosing your colours of pre-planning this. Just mix that up nicely. Okay, so I think the next one is gonna go, actually we'll pop him in here. And I'm gonna put a hole in the middle of this one. I want it to be too perfect, so we won't fiddle too much. But yeah, this is also a great way of trying new paints. If you've got new paints and you want to swatch them out to see what the colours are like, see how they behave. Pebble swatching is such a relaxing and beautiful way to swatch. And I noticed that I keep getting tagged on Instagram by people who are now pebble swatching rather than swatching in the traditional way. And that makes me really happy because I know how much fun I have doing this and just how relaxing it is. Sometimes you just want something easy to paint. I mean, I spend a lot of my working life, I'm a full-time professional artist, by the way, for those of you who are perhaps new to my channel. I spend a lot of my working life really working on quite, I don't know, I don't want to say difficult art, but it involves a lot of planning and also concentration and technical skill. And this does require some technical skill, but it's good for you to, if you're a beginner, to get used to the way paint behaves and to control your brush and so on. And I think this is a great exercise for that. Love that colour. Okay, we're going to just lift off a little bit of the paint. But yeah, this is something I can do that doesn't require too much brain power. So it's good for those days where you feel a little bit like I really want to sit down and paint, but I'm not sure I have the, I don't know, what can we call it, concentration skills to paint something more complex. Okay, the next colour, which one should we go for? The two we haven't used are the Payne's Grey Bluish and the Haze Indigo. I think Haze Indigo, because I think the Payne's Grey Bluish might be kind of similar to this one. So I'm going to go for something that I can place here. Oh, it's separating from the binder a little bit. If your paint does that, by the way, if you're working from watercolour tubes and you find that, as you can see here, the binder has kind of separated from the pigment, just give it a really good mix on your palette. Get it all mixed in again. I don't know why paint sometimes does that. If it's been stored for a little while and hasn't been used. Trying to remember the last time I used my haze set. Maybe a couple of months or so. Okay, got quite a lot of paint there, but I don't want this to be too dark, so I'm going to really try and water this down a little bit. I mean, my stones are going to be quite dark, so I think they're going to need some detail on top. So when they're dry, I'm going to show you how I do that and what I use to do that as well. Yeah, try and vary the shapes of your pebbles. And remember that pebbles aren't perfectly shaped. Some of them are, but they can pretty much be any shape, can't they? Within reason. Just do lovely organic shapes. I always like mine to have quite rounded edges. Okay, I'm just gonna lift off just a little bit. And you see now how this is evolving into a really lovely composition already. Okay, so let's try, I'm actually a bit reluctant to try the Payne's Grey Bluish. I think I'm gonna go with, I'm gonna break this up and put in some more of the Haze Pink, because I think we're gonna have too many that are too similar and we don't want that. I probably could have had a little bit more variety in the colours I've chosen, but I think this is going to look nice anyway, and I think it will look even better once I've put the details on the top. So let's go for maybe a smaller pebble here. And I'm going to make sure I don't use too much pigment this time. I'm now going to use the random grey again, but this time I'm going to try not to put so much pigment on the page. So do we want, I think we might want a slightly longer pebble. Maybe something a bit like that. I'm just going to try and add loads of water. Turn that around so it's easier to work on. I find this is the way I get really nice crisp edges. is by turning the paper so that the brush is more comfortable to use to create those edges. So they're kind of in front of you, like it is for me now, if this is making sense. That's the easiest way to get crisp edges, I find anyway. Yeah, I would suggest you use a brush that can hold quite a bit of pigment, quite a bit of water. It just makes this exercise more enjoyable, so you do need a fairly large brush. You'll find it more difficult if you're using a tiny brush. Right, I kind of feel like that needs to be a bit more curved here. It's like you'll know what looks pleasing to your eye, and you can just adapt as you go along. I love the fact that with watercolour you can just move it around and you can change things while it's still wet. Yeah, that's better, I think. Maybe just neaten it up a little bit up here. I'm super fussy, you don't have to be this fussy. I just really like neat edges. Okay, I'm just going to drop some pigment there. We'll just see how that dries. I'm going to just lift off a little bit. So each time I'm just lifting off each pebble a little bit of the paint, just where like the light would hit it. Take a little bit extra of this one. Okay, I think now might be the time. I'm going to bring in another palette, and now may be the time to add the Payne's Grey Bluish. I really hope this doesn't look too similar to the other colours. Oh yeah, this is much more of an inky blue, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to, I think, put the next one here and let's make it slightly more squared off. Oh wow, you don't need much of this paint. Very, very strong colour. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just continue filling this page. I think I'm probably just going to do another couple of pebbles. I always like to have an uneven number if I'm making an artwork rather than just swatching. So how many have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I'll do another couple, so that'll be 9 pebbles in total. I'll probably speed up the footage so it doesn't make this video super long, and then I'm going to leave it to dry and we'll come back and I'll show you how I decorate them. I left these for a good couple of hours to dry, just to make sure they're fully dry before I work on top of them. You probably won't have to leave them that long, but I went off to edit the video, so I just decided to leave them for a bit. If you want that really lovely textured pebble effect, the granulating watercolours are the way to go. I love that colour separation in this one, as well as the granulation, that lovely texture. So yeah, they work really well for designs like this. So you could just leave this as it is. It could just be a finished artwork. But if you want to add a little bit more interest to it, I tend to do one of two things. So I'll either just add some very simple lines, because you often get pebbles with the lovely natural veining and white lines running through them. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this one. So you can also do that to your pebbles if you like. I'm going to show you what I use for that, the brush and the paint I use. And the other thing I tend to do, if I want to make them a little bit more decorative, is I actually paint like very simple nature designs on them and other patterns. But we're not going to do that today. What we're going to do is just some very simple lines and veining, and you'll see how that just adds a little bit more interest to these. So for the details on top, I'll tend to use one of three things. I really like to use this acrylic ink. It's the FW acrylic ink from De La Rowney. It's quite opaque, so it's really good for doing details on top of your watercolour paintings. I also have more recently got into using the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Now this was suggested to me by one of my subscribers, and I'm liking this too. This is more like, I would say, a very thick gouache paint. The bleed proof part means that you can go over the top of even marker pens, I believe, and the colour won't bleed through into the white. But you don't really have that problem with watercolours, generally speaking. But it is really nice to do the details over the top. The other thing you could use is just some white gouache paint. Now, the Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache is one of my favourite favourite gouache paints. The permanent white is one I always have. I have a large tube of this because I get through quite a lot of white when I'm using gouache. So you could use that as well. I think what I'm going to use today is the FW acrylic ink. So I'm going to give it a really good shake because it always needs to be shaken before you can use it, this one, because it separates. So what I tend to do, if it has a little pipette, is just put tiny amount of paint, or ink rather, on the palette. And then I'm going to use one of my really tiny brushes. So this is a ProArte PROLENE Series 101 size 30 brush. It's really tiny and they're fantastic for details. So these are the ones I tend to use if I'm doing detail work. So we perhaps won't decorate all of the stones. We'll see. We just do it instinctively. Again, a bit like I did when I was putting this composition together. So if we start with the one at the top, the first stone we did, I'm just going to very lightly, let me think how I want to do this. Do I want to go like that, or do I want to go like that? Maybe I will go like this. So just kind of curve your line around the stone. You'll need a pretty steady hand for this. But this is something that also comes with practice. People often ask how I have such a steady hand, and I mean, partly it's just years of painting and practice. So I'm going to make this second line a little bit thicker than the first one. And don't worry if they're not perfect, because the lines on the stones aren't perfect. But you might want to try and get it relatively straight. But with the other veining, we may kind of be a bit more loose and kind of go all over the place a bit. We'll see. You can also go over them twice if you want a little bit more of a defined opaque line. I tend to do that quite a lot when I'm using the acrylic ink. Okay, so that stone, I'm just going to leave that like that with these white lines running through it. So I think probably this one will have something. I'm wondering whether we just do more natural veining this time, so just don't kind of press so hard or be so defined with the brush, rather just kind of lightly take it across the surface there. So we have a much thinner line. It doesn't matter if it kind of breaks up a little bit. And the veining would be thicker in places and thinner in others, so don't worry too much. Just really allow your brush to just lightly go across the surface. And just stop whenever you feel like there are enough lines. I don't want to overdo it. I've made a couple of the lines here a bit thicker. I might do just another slightly thicker, more defined one through there. I just add them slowly and try to be aware of the fact that you may add too many if you just keep going. So I think that one might be finished now. I'm going to leave that there. So with this stone, I wonder whether we just leave it, because it already has this kind of lovely light area here. It already has the hole. What we could do, and what I sometimes do on these ones, is just add just a little hint there, kind of a little highlight. Do you know what? I think I might just leave it like that. So let's move on to this one. And with this one, I think what I'm going to do is add maybe a line here. And then a couple on this end. Kind of feel like that one needs to have a little bit more of a curve to it. So by thickening it, we can make it a little bit more of a curve rather than just being dead straight. Yeah, that looks quite nice actually. So I'm going to leave that fairly simple. You don't want to overdo this, so we have to just keep them simple. I actually might, just looking at this, add a tiny little bit there. So with this little one, I'm just going to add a very faint line there. And I'm going to leave it at that. With this one, I think it might be interesting to perhaps add a few little spots, because sometimes you see this in stones where they have these little flecks. So try to vary what you're doing on different stones. It could be a good idea to Google pebbles and you'll get some ideas for different patterns. Vary them and make some of them bigger than the other ones. Just keep adding until you feel like it looks fairly natural and not too much. So I think that looks pretty good. Okay, on to, should we do this one? What should we do on this one? This looks more like a piece of sea glass to me than a pebble. I don't know whether to do anything on that one. I wonder whether that one could just be left. So I feel like it's nice to have a couple that don't have any markings. This one, I'm going to do one thick kind of wavy line through it. And this one, we'll do maybe one thicker line. Possibly some slightly wavy, thinner lines either side. And possibly one over here, maybe two. Now, do we want to do anything with this little piece here? Or do we want to leave it? What I might do with this one is I'm going to add water to the acrylic ink. Get a lot of water on our brush, and let's just see if we do some very loose little spots. So it's kind of similar to this one, but maybe a little bit more blotchy and spotty. Proper little round dots. We don't want them perfect. So because this has been diluted with the water, it's much more transparent, which is giving us a very subtle effect, which is kind of nice. I've decided to just add another line here. So I'm going to turn that around so it makes it easier. Okay, so there we go. That's finished, and it was just so easy and so enjoyable to do. I hope that some of you will have a go at this. Let me know how you got on, if you decided to follow along, or if you decide that you're going to have a go at some point. You can always tag me on Instagram at Natasha Newton Art. And although I don't get to see everything because quite a few people tag me, I do try and have a look through, and I do try to like, comment on as many as possible. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, perhaps you're new here, have a look around. If you like what you see, perhaps consider subscribing. I also have a Patreon where I give a more in-depth look. It's kind of a behind the scenes, more in-depth look at my life as an artist and my art process and running a creative business. Okay, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you again soon in another video.